I'm John Evans. Welcome to another episode of One-on-One. Boy, Ben Folds has a lot on his plate right now. The acclaimed singer-songwriter and founder of the 90s indie band Ben Folds 5 is getting ready to record a live performance with the National Symphony Orchestra in the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. That's going to be released later as a record album. Ben is also releasing his first Christmas record. It's called Slayer, to get all of his fans into the holiday spirit. Ben is coming to Wilmington as well. He is going to headline From Wilmington with Love, a benefit concert on October the 29th, with all of the proceeds going to help Western North Carolina recover after Hurricane Helene. Now, with all of that on his busy schedule, Ben Folds actually found some time to sit down and speak with me for this week's podcast interview. We talked about that hurricane benefit show and also about his illustrious career. Ben Folds, who is a 2011 inductee into the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame, is with us. Ben, thanks for taking the time. Appreciate you joining us for the One-on-One with John Evans podcast.
Absolutely. Good to be here.
How did you get involved with doing this concert here in Wilmington, Ben?
Well, we stay pretty active in North Carolina, although I'm not living there at the moment myself. We come there quite a bit to work on a project that we started called Keys for Kids, which is the tying together of 7 nonprofits in North Carolina to give kids a chance to learn music early. And so through Mayor Sappho and Governor Cooper's office, we were able to become a part of this. So we're in constant communication with these people anyway. And as soon as the mayor and the governor indicated they wanted to try to find ways to raise any extra money and awareness for relief, then we jumped.
Well, you live in Nashville now, but being from the Winston-Salem area, you know Western North Carolina is not used to getting the kind of weather they got with Helene. On the coast here, we're kind of resilient to tropical systems, but Western North Carolina is really not used to that, and boy, did it hit them hard.
Yeah, well, and besides just not being used to it as people, the land is not used to it either. I mean, the erosion due to flooding is not something that is kind of built into the land's understanding either. So it's pretty exceptional and awful stuff.
You've got some pretty cool things happening. You're recording a live record with the National Symphony Orchestra at the Kennedy Center, where you're an advisor. You've got a Christmas record releasing called Slayer. Can you talk to me about why you wanted to do both of those projects?
Well, I've been touring symphony orchestras for, I guess, about 2 decades now, and it's just time to make an album because it's left on the stage. That's the orchestra that I do the most work with, so it was a natural pairing to do it with them. So yeah, that'll capture all the stuff that we've been doing with symphony orchestras for at least the last 10, 15 years, and Slayer. Sleigh, like sleigh bells, or get it, haha.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I just really wanted to, make a holiday record because, the holiday is a reset time that resembles the last one and the last one and the last one and the last one. The only difference is you. Same Christmas stuff, same sales, same decorations, but you're different. And so I found it really easy or inspiring to write from that perspective.
I've been reading your memoir, A Dream About Lightning Bugs, A Life of Music and Cheap Lessons. It's a really cool read, and it has some fascinating stories in it, including the backstory about the song Brick. I'm not going to ruin it for the folks who haven't read it yet, but I agree with you that everyone should write their own memoir, if only to remember the people and the decisions that brought you where you are today. What did you learn about yourself that maybe you weren't expecting to learn when you put all of your life's work and your thoughts down on hardcover?
Yeah, well, I think it's what you just said is key, because we reach a adult age. I wrote that I guess as I was probably turning 50, um, and many of our lessons that we learn throughout life were sort of the reportings of the child. If you observe something through the lens of childhood, and an 8-year-old sees a situation, um, you store it and you kind of adjudicate the whole thing at that age. You can cast a judgment on it. I'll give you an example. Is like, if you think that a teacher is after you, like they've got it in for me. This teacher got it in for me. I'm 8 years old, and that teacher's being so super mean. Well, what's scary to adulthood is that teacher was so super mean. As an adult, as soon as you look at it, you go, okay, well, the police report or the child report that was 8 years old said this happened, this happened, this happened. But when you really think about it as an adult, you're like, okay, wait a minute. The teacher was 25, had a bunch of screaming kids, was trying to teach me the right thing, was doing the best that they could. You kind of look at it through a different lens. And I think that that's really helpful as you're trying to sort your lessons out. Also, to remember things slightly falsely, as we all do. We remember memory. We remember memories. We remember remembering. And we tend to change the memories to sort of suit dinner conversation or to suit our ego. But if you can drop that stuff and really start fact checking yourself the best you can, I mean, no one can do it perfectly. But if you can do it the best you can, I think it sort of relaxes the soul a little bit because you don't any longer carry, how hard it is to walk around with a white lie. It's this sort of curb your enthusiasm problem. There comes a time when it becomes difficult to correct the lie. And I think these things take a lot, being honest with yourself takes a lot off of your shoulders. That's what I learned the most. And then, of course, you learn more about writing. A friend of mine has a quote that goes something like this: "You never learn to write a book. You only learn to write the book that you're on." So I find that really interesting. Yeah,
I've really enjoyed it. I think what makes it fun is you have the picture of your drum in the pond. You have your picture of yourself in the polka outfit. So those those pictures and those stories kind of go together to say, yeah, he wasn't just telling something. He actually was in a polka outfit after he left the University of Miami.
Well, it's interesting because the drum in the lake. Those who haven't read it, I flunked a crucial test as a drummer in a really good jazz school, University of Miami. Lost my scholarship as a result, and I threw my drums in the lake. Now, first of all, the drum set was on its last leg. It purchased for $27, and it wasn't going to make the trip. So my drama moment was, it was not so expensive and crazy as it might seem. Secondly, what I noticed from the picture was that there was no hardware on it, which means I took the time to take every hardware off before throwing it in the lake, which is kind of a little bit at odds with my claim that it was a knee-jerk thing. It was a little more premeditated than that, and I actually didn't remember that. But when I started looking at that picture, I was like, there's no hardware. Oh, that sly bastard took the hardware off. Lake, and then I flew with my hardware, took a bus with my hardware back to North Carolina with my tail tucked.
Well, that's funny. And growing up in Pennsylvania like I did, and growing up in an area where there was a lot of Polish and Russian descendants, I remember the beer barrel polka. I remember "In Heaven There Is No Beer, That's Why We Drink It Here." Some of the songs that you played when you dressed up and played the polkas as a young man.
Yeah, there wasn't a strong, Polish, German polka, scene in North Carolina at all. And Veronica opened this real state-of-the-art place and tried to hire a band, but realized that she couldn't afford that for opening night. And I showed her I could do it all on the keyboard. And so I learned all the polkas I could stuff into my tiny mind. And yeah. Beer barrel polka was always a big one, and of course the chicken dance.
Yeah.
people love the chicken dance. It's a really fun culture.
Yeah, but as soon as I read it, Beer Barrel Polka, I was like, I remember that as an 8-year-old going to the Saturday afternoon Polish festival and hearing them play that when I when I was a kid. So you brought back a memory for me. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I'm sorry.
Who was that 20-something young man who formed a band in Chapel Hill in the mid 90s? Do you remember what he was like and do you recognize him today?
That's a fun question. I'm much more rounded now. I think I was a little rough around the edges, and had a worse temper, a lot cockier, and a little less empathetic. I mean, I think that's probably normal. But I do remember that about my time then. I was much rougher character. You get older and you start to, like I was saying about looking back at the teacher, who I'm 58 and thinking about a teacher that was in their mid 20s. Like, how are you doing this? Like, how are you making ends meet? We need to pay teachers better. And those are the things I think of now. But when I was, when you're younger, you're just, you're probably a little meaner. I think kids are a little kinder now, though. I learn a lot from kids and uh, their tolerance was not something that my generation was as good about. So, old horse trying to learn some new tricks.
Do you remember when it clicked in your mind? I mean, you're busting, you're playing in bands, you move to Nashville, you come back, you form Ben Folds Five. But do you remember that time when you said, I can do this for the rest of my life? I'm not going to have to work at
Yeah,
Lowe's or a grocery store and also do this part time. When was that? Do you remember?
it took a long time for that to leave my system. It's still in my system a little bit. I mean, I was on tour as few as 10 years ago, noticing that I still have I get a little buzz of excitement to pass a grocery store or a coffee shop that says help wanted. I'm like, they got a job there. Like I still, I still think that I'm going to need a backup plan. That was always, and it's really one of the things that is driving, my trip back into North Carolina. It breaks my heart for everyone in the western part of the state. Period. Losing a house, losing your health, losing anything so important. I mean, that's just huge. But along with it are the stories of people already barely able to chase their dreams. Like the cats that are with me that we're bringing out to Wilmington, Jim Lauderdale, Caleb Caudle, Moonshine State, Josh Goforth. These are Western North Carolina artists that, look, they're probably doing just fine. That's how we know about them, but they're probably also barely squeaking by. It's you know dreaming and working so hard to be a musical artist, and we need musical artists, um, is really tough. All you need is your venues wiped out and your audience not able to get to a show, and disrupting your life or loss of property. I mean, there was a flood in Nashville. I lost an entire piano and half of my equipment in. I could afford that. I had insurance, but yeah. So I do feel for these cats. But yeah, I still relate. Like I really do. Like I'm a little more distant than it was. I'm a little bit like, okay, it's going to be okay, but it's ingrained in your head. You know.
Yeah. I said at the top you're a North Carolina Music Hall of Fame nominee. You had a Music City Walk of Fame. You've received an Emmy Award nomination in 2022. You've got a gold record, a platinum record. At 58, do any of those mean any more than any others? Or is it just the ability to be able to play in Wilmington if I want to play, or play in Winston-Salem, or play in Washington, D.C.?
Well, it's all a dream. I think when it comes to recognition, when I'm recognized, like by my peers, like for instance, the Americans for the Arts or various music therapy organizations, many of them regional or local, will give me a little thing. Sometimes they make it up. They make it like, they give me a plaque or something just out of appreciation. That means a lot to me, because that can go really unnoticed. And it's nice to know that someone noticed that you were helping them. I mean, that's not necessary, but it's nice. And those are the things when it comes to recognition, I'm proud of. And I'm also proud of, like, for anyone that is up and coming as a musician, and for many of us that are kind of, in the stream doing it, it's very difficult to keep yourself surrounded by a good, honest group of people. And that has been something I've been able to do too. So those things I'm proud of. The whole thing, good. It's amazing, actually.
Well, you and I are about the same age, 3 or 4 years difference, and that's hard to believe since you look about 15 years younger than I do. But I could ask you questions about your songs all day, and I know you don't have that kind of time, but the one that gets to me at 62 is Fred Jones Part 2, because you said you wrote it about the editor of a local paper meeting the end of his career. But now, in my 60s, I can almost see or hear someone saying, "Sorry, Mr. Evans, it's time."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And such a different take on it now than in 2001 when I heard it on Rockin' the Suburbs.
It is interesting. I'm particularly proud of that song, because, it's the writer's job to put yourself in other people's shoes sometimes. And I wrote that when I was 33. Yeah, and it was the editor of the Winston-Salem Journal. He was a Pulitzer Prize journalist. He was there before anyone of Caucasian persuasion would have been in the South, to write about civil rights, probably putting himself in danger sometimes, when it came to that. And yeah, he was just unceremoniously taken out on a Friday, as is the HR way.
Yep.
They'd like tell someone you're gone, and it was super quick and very, very impersonal. And it hurt my feelings. I looked up to the guy, and so that's what the song comes from. Whether or not he related to the experience, I couldn't say because we never discussed it. And he passed last year, actually.
Yeah, it's amazing though. I remember hearing it in 2001 or 2002 when I first heard it, and never had that person in the back of my mind saying my name in that Mr. Jones part. I imagine that's probably not the only one that you look at differently now in 2024 than you did in the 90s or the early 2000s.
Well, I always thought, some of the song is, look, we're not going to have a party. No one's going to be singing any songs. Half the people here don't know your last name anymore. And to everyone else, it's just another day. And that also plays into the sad truth about all of us passing. It's like, yeah, people are sad, but life goes on. And life went on when we were just doing our thing. It's a rough, very sad reality of life, The end is life barrels on like a runaway train. The passengers change, yeah, but everything else,
yeah,
stays the same. It's not something we want. The world revolves around me, or for you, it revolves around you. For everyone watching this, it's like we're the most important person in our life.
I interviewed Kevin Cronin of REO Speedwagon when they played for the Azalea Festival a couple of years ago, and he said, the life of a performer is you tour for years, you introduce new music, and your fans get used to it. But then after a while, you're touring, and the fans know every word of every song that you play. And that is a different kind of rush to him, he said, than it was in the first 20 years or so. Do you get that same thrill, especially like during Zach and Sarah, when the audience can sing the chorus and sing along with you? Does that give you a different kind of rush than maybe the first couple keys in a song, introducing it to the audience?
Well, I think the thing is, and I read this somewhere when I was younger, the Beatles saying that one of the big challenges for them when they were playing their first, I don't know how long they played the Cavern, the famous Cavern, wasn't Leeds,
Liverpool.
Yeah, was that they would bring a new song and no one would know it. They'd know their older stuff, and of course they're only 20 years old at that point, but they only knew their older stuff. So when they were playing "I Want to Hold Your Hand," everyone talked through it. The thing is, no matter where you are in your career, people will always know the older stuff, and you have to remember that new stuff you introduce um, is going to be new for a while, and it is exciting, the older stuff. But for someone like me who continues to make newer stuff, I'm always like I'm like the defense attorney for my new stuff. You know, like I talk about it more and I emphasize it more, and of course people don't know it yet because it's not out there. So I go with the glass half empty sometimes on that, and I go, oh, everyone knows my old stuff. It's the way the psyche.
From releasing Whatever and Ever Amen to Rockin' the Suburbs to Way Too Normal and then What Matters Most in 23, four different records at four different parts in your career. Is the expectation for success of those records different now than it was back then? Were you thinking, oh man, I hope we get a gold record, I hope people buy it, versus, hey, this is me at 57, here's what I have to say?
Well, I think one must concentrate on everything but the sales. Um, there when I was selling far more records, the industry was also selling far more records. I mean, we were in an era where, selling a million records was way more common. It's not. So, I'm down with the curve, but it's also it's a kid's business being competitive in the charts. So I think it's important to retain your dignity by making albums. It gives me the freedom to make albums that have no single. I don't worry about that. I'm not going to hoe myself out for something that's not going to sell that much. But they do sink in. It's like the album's so there. It didn't sell a whole lot by anybody's standards, but it was number one on the classical chart for like 3 months. And it has become now with audiences, people know the songs. The piano concerto on that, I performed, I think, at least one movement of it a night for 100 shows with orchestras. Piano concertos do not get 100 performances with orchestras. So even though the album probably, gosh, it might have sold 75,000 records or something, that's not much. We were selling 75,000 a week with Ben Folds 5. But that was a different era too. Like that was more normal to sell those. So, I know a lot about sales, but I don't I try to put my worth there. I'm more excited to think I can make recordings that are what I would like to leave behind and would like to share with people.
You've worked with a lot of really diverse group of talents. Weird Al, William Shatner, and your newest duo with Lindsey Kraft on the Christmas record. Do you get into those efforts with a desire to learn, to improve, or is it just like, I think this is going to sound cool, let's try it?
Well, I like storytelling, and I like what people who are used to being theatrical can do for a song. And in the three instances that you brought up, all three of those are acting. And I think, actors, I like to work with them to the point where we're not trying to, make this, Pavarotti and Julie Andrews. We're trying to tell the story. And so I do like that about actors. Otherwise, it's just wonderful to work with the best. All these people are kind of the best at what they do, which I'm lucky.
What are your expectations when you go in with the National Symphony Orchestra this weekend to record that record? You've performed with that group many a time, but will there be that nervous energy because you're recording it and you want to release it? And so you have to be pitch perfect every time?
Yeah, it's huge. It's a lot of pressure. People, in this era, we don't really capture live performances that much. Most performances on the albums we hear are edited performances. And I think that we're very good at that. But when you go on a stage with an orchestra, and we have two passes, one on Friday and one on Saturday, that's it. There's no secret. There's no safety net. Every mic on the stage is open. You can't go punching things around. Your editing is limited, and I think that's actually exciting because everyone in the audience hears the record. They just heard it. That's it. I mean, it'll be edited tighter so that there's not links between the songs and stuff, but it's what they heard, and that's kind of rare. And it's certainly scary for me. I mean, I've got to be on physically and mentally, and it's hard not to get in your head. I mean, yeah, I look at it as a sporting event. It's going to be like, oh my. But I love this is the thing about having been in my business for so long, is I get these opportunities, the orchestra and the record label and everyone trusts you to do a thing, and I get these opportunities.
What about the Christmas record? Do you want to turn on Sirius Radio in 20 years and have Christmas classics, and all of a sudden something off Slayer pops up with Ben Folds?
It's always a threat, and that's the thing about putting a record on. No matter what, you always in the back of your head, you're like, oh, something could pop as a classic. I feel really good about we can have this Lindsay Craft. The feedback we've gotten kind of overwhelming, that there's not a song, a holiday song, that really does that. It's a little, not in a bad way, but it's a little Hallmark movie. The song is. There aren't many romantic Christmas.
Once again, the concert is called From Wilmington with Love. It is scheduled for October the 29th at Greenfield Lake Amphitheater here in Wilmington, with all of the proceeds going to benefit charities that are helping victims of Hurricane Helene in western North Carolina. The headliner is going to be Ben Folds, the North Carolina native. The Hall of Famer here in North Carolina is going to be leading that effort. Ben, I know you're very busy. I appreciate you taking the time to join us, and thanks for being on the One-on-One with John Evans podcast. We'll see you here in Wilmington next week.
Thank you very much. And if you can't come to the show, at least go to the website and see if you can help out. And if nothing else, help the spread of disinformation not happen. That's hurting people.
A big thank you to Ben Folds for taking time from his very busy schedule to join us for this week's podcast interview. You can keep up with all of his work and his touring schedule by going to benfolds.com. And the benefit show here in Wilmington on October 29th is sold out, but you can join the hurricane relief effort by clicking the link that I've put inside this story on WECT.com. Now, before we go, I'd like to ask you a favor. Please follow or subscribe to the One-on-One with John Evans podcast on whatever app you use to listen to your favorite shows. And if you would be so kind, please leave us a rating or a review. We do care what you think about our interviews, and the more feedback we have from friends like you, the higher we'll be listed on the podcast apps, the better chance we'll have of bringing in even more new listeners. I'm John Evans. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of One-on-One.